Hello, everyone, and welcome back to One Soccer. I'm your host today, Josh Deming, joined by my colleague Alex Gange-Ruzic. And today we have a few different topics to discuss. Can Champ is where we are going to begin. We have a couple of cup sets. One led to a CPL team moving on. One did not, unfortunately for them, on away goals. We also have the Canadian Women's National Team and their roster drop to discuss. We will begin with CF Montreal and Forge. It's the biggest story coming out of the Canadian Championship. But first things first, Alex, welcome back to the channel, and how you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Nice little Thursday after a long weekend. Can't complain. It's been a cup week, and man, what a week! That's Tuesday. I was out at BC Place and nearly watched Cavalry repeat history in 2019. I wasn't in the building in 2019, so I was like, "Whoa, is this kind of what it feels like?" This time, though, the Whitecaps, different group, they held on, but narrowly. Cavalry battled to the end, of course. Toronto FC went up against Saint Laurent, took care of business, but Saint Laurent even scored a special goal. First League One Canada side to score against an MLS side, which again we'll talk about it. Like the difference of budgets between the levels, it's just an incredible story. And just a moment to remember for Saint Laurent. And then yesterday, the big one, right? Forge goes to CF Montreal and doesn't just win, doesn't just hold on for dear life. They take it to Montreal, and then they just professionally got the job done the rest of the way, and now head to the semifinals. They became the third CPL team to beat an MLS side in this competition, and of course Montreal becomes the first one not named the Whitecaps to suffer that fate. So certainly I'm sure some Whitecaps fans will be throwing some barbs over to Montreal, being like, hey, this is what it feels like. But yeah, certainly a heck of a week of cup football, and that's, I haven't even mentioned everything that's going on with both national teams. Lots of exciting news, so certainly huge.
And we'll get to that towards the end of the live stream today. But if you guys are joining us, be sure to drop a like on the stream. Let us know what your thoughts are on Forge defeating CF Montreal. That is where we are going to begin. And we're going to look at it from both sides. We're going to take a look at Forge. What does this mean for this side? Finally getting over the hump that is CF Montreal, going up against TFC next. But we are really going to try to take a look at CF Montreal and ask the question, really, Alex, is this rock bottom? We know that there's issues going on with the club. I mean, if you look at their form in Major League Soccer right now, they're 3-3-7 towards the bottom. They've conceded the second most goals in the league, only to the Earthquakes, who have played one more game. Their best player, they're kind of their guy, CF Montreal's guy, and Mathieu Choinière being linked to other clubs in Major League Soccer because they're not willing to pay him. Renard, obviously, that storyline, like there's just a lot going on right now at CF Montreal, and we're hoping to get Sofiane on here a little bit later, and if he does, we'll ask him some questions. We're not sure quite yet. So, Alex, just to begin to unpack all of that, let's begin with, is this rock bottom, do you think, for the CF Montreal side, who going into the year and into this new season, I would say had a little bit of optimism, and I think it's quickly been squashed?
If this isn't rock bottom, it's hard to think of what's closer to it. It's just wild because it kind of felt like a fresh start of sorts. Hernan Losada was determined to be the wrong coach last year. They bring in Laurent Courtois, profile I like, profile that's respected. He plays nice football, comes from the Wilfred Nazi school, is kind of like a chance to rejig what had been there in 2022. And then now you just look at where things are, I guess just 5-6 months later, that this feels like rock bottom. Because like, where do you start? First off, this Canadian Championship loss, and we'll give Forge their flowers because they absolutely deserve it, again, for not just how they won, but the fact they won, but how they won, the mentality they showed, the confidence, the bravado. But for Montreal, the fact is, this is a club that needs to be competing for the Canadian Championship every year. That's the standard they've set as a club. So falling short in the quarterfinals that's a massive disappointment, especially 2 legs at home, against a side that they'll be favored to win on paper. You look at MLS play, they've been struggling. Yes, a lot of their games have been on the road, but it feels like they've just hit a wall. Then they went to Toronto FC. That's a game where, look, you can lose to TFC. It's a derby. You win some, you lose some. You can never go into a derby match and lose 5-1. You just can't. That's just something where in all over the world, Barcelona beats Real Madrid beats Barcelona. Someone loses 5-1, heads roll. Like that's the sort of standard that you have in a derby match. You look at the performances, you look at the fact that your star player, an MLS All-Star, not demanded, but at least asked to trade. There's friction around what he believes he should be paid. That shouldn't be happening. He's the sort of player you should be retaining and wanting to feel happy about being in Montreal. Your supporters made a silent protest in yesterday's game. They had a huge bandana on the back of the stadium that says unacceptable. And I mean, that kind of just sums up what it's been right now. Yeah, it's a tough time in Montreal. And I think it's something where it's hard to really see where they go from here, because they've had a lot of injuries, which is certainly not helping. But just confidence in all-time low. And I didn't even mention Olivier Renard and off the field as well. His post as a sporting director. Really, a lot's gone wrong in Montreal right now.
Yeah, it's not great. If any of you guys are CF Montreal fans, give me your guys' biggest takeaway from the match, or what do you think the biggest issue is with the club right now in the chat, and we can discuss some of that. We're gonna go through a couple comments right now, and mostly it's just congratulations to Forge. It was an awesome match. This is an interesting one, and I do want to switch gears a little bit over to Forge because, like you mentioned, Alex, they deserve some flowers. The reality is Forge is a great team, and CF Montreal is in one of its worst moments, so it's just a natural outcome. Let's start with that, Alex, because I remember talking to you, and we've said this a few times, I think on stream, if we talked about Forge, was the fact that the Forge front four, and at least the attacking midfielders with Benny Banga, Borges, and Chouanier. Borges and Chouanier hardly played last season, both battling injuries. I don't remember what the starts were, but they were 12 starts, and I think Borges had about 18 starts, but he played in a lot of matches. But they're both fit right now, and they're firing, and you can see what this fully healthy Forge side looks like. And when we talked about this match, they came out of the gate flying, and they got a 1-1 draw, which I would say, sets things up nicely for CF Montreal to go back home, knowing that, they basically just need to win. And then Forge comes out. They had about 62% possession the first 15 or so minutes. They came out hungry. They came out with desire. They scored 2 goals in the opening 25 and basically kind of, I think, went on cruise control for the rest of the game. I know it's difficult with that massive weather delay to try to get your head back in the game. 2 hours is not easy. There were some comments I was reading on X just speaking look what happens when CF Montreal actually wakes up. And I think we should dive into that a little bit, Alex, because when you score 2 goals that quickly away from home against, an opposition that on paper has more talent than you do, they're in a higher league, naturally you're going to adjust your game to try to see this thing through. CF Montreal needed 3 goals, and I think Forge did a really good job. They had their opportunities. They obviously got the one, but at the end of the day, I think Forge had some really good game management and saw this thing out. And now they're going into a semifinals, and I think over 2 legs, I think it's fair to say that Forge were the deserving side to go through. Do you agree? What do you have to say about the comments of CF Montreal, woke up kind of, which, yes, they were playing better because they had more of the ball, but that was intentional on Forge's behalf.
Yeah, well, I think Forge's game plan was executed to perfection. They obviously came out, knew they needed at least 1 to win. If the game finished 0-0, they would have been out. Of course, they lost 1-0, they would have been out. They needed at least 1. 1-1 draw would have got them to PKs. 2-2 draw, they win on away goals. They knew they needed at least 1. They went after that goal. They got 2 within the first 25, 2 well-deserved goals. What I liked, too, is how they targeted weaknesses. The first goal, Malcolm Duncan, who had a very good game. He ended up getting the ball out wide, makes this perfect switch so we can see her to Benny Banga, knowing that Montreal's full wingbacks can sometimes get caught up high up the pitch. Benny Banga, as he does, attacked directly. Daniel Parra found a soft space. Pressure was minimal. Daniel Parra scored. By the way, speak of another Forge player who had an excellent performance. My goodness, that might have been one of the best performances I've ever seen of a CPL player in any match ever. He was just an absolute unit at both ends of the pitch, on and off the ball.
Just before you, Alex, I think it's fair to probably already say that he may be the signing of the season. He has been absolutely flawless so far for Forge, both in the Canadian Championship, because I think his performance has been good, but even in the league, he's just been such a perfect addition to this Forge side. And they're going to probably have some trouble hanging on to him after this season.
Yeah, his quality is immense. He looks like an MLS League MX quality level player, and you didn't know what to expect, right? Because League MX signings have been a mixed bag. For every Alejandro Diaz, had Guile Sandoval's, for every Francisco Acuna, you've had some of these, guys who have come and gone without much fanfare. He's top signing. So shout out to him. Then the second goal too. It's something that we saw a lot on the broadcast. Montreal's high line. Is it sustainable? They play Kwesi Poku up front because, Jordan Hamilton wasn't fully fit. Terran Campbell's been injured. Malcolm Duncan, again, phenomenal game, just right over the top. Simple ball. Poku shows his pace. Good finish. Those were two clearly targeted goals. This isn't one, some sort of you catch Montreal in a transition moment. No, Forge had possession in both cases, identified a weakness, nailed it. And then when you're up 2-0, you have to remember Montreal needed 3 goals. So the initiative was always going to be on them. Forge was going to open up and chase the third. That would just be, ridiculous. That's just self-sabotage. They were always going to sit back. It's score effects. When there's that big of a lead, the team that's trailing will always push. That's why sometimes in hockey with some of the possession metrics, they have the one where it's like they only track possession when the scores within 1 goal are tied, because the possession stats skew when a team's up 2 or 3. So Forge, for them, the fact that they held on the rest of the way, only allowed 1 goal despite how hard Montreal was pushing. It's a credit to Para. He had 11 clearances. It's a credit to Achinoti Janssen and Metusala, who were excellent at the back. Owolabi Bellu when he came on. Malcolm Duncan. Also Chris Kalongo. I think he ended up finishing with 7 saves. Like, it was an exceptional performance by Forge. And really, I'm looking at that. They can genuinely be pleased with every aspect of their performance, especially given how Montreal threw everything at them. So, no, I think if you're going to dismiss that second half and be like, oh, Montreal push, they had to. And the fact that they did with the resources that they had, they're an MLS team going up against a CPL team, and they're only able to muster up 1 goal. That's more of a credit to Forge, I think, than it is an indictment of Montreal's second half play.
Yeah, excellent game management, like you said. There's an interesting take on why Poku started up front. It was simply just to have speed up there. I mean, Badibanga, Borges, Chouanier are decently fast, but to have someone who can, he can punt the ball up and just stretch the back line, I think was important. I was a little surprised by it. And I think that was the biggest question mark when you saw the starting 11 was, oh, this is a little different. But I thought he had an excellent game. But I want to flip it, because if you look at Forge's starting 11, besides Poku and the surprise up front, which you kind of talked about, it's basically their best 11. So now let's take a look at CF Montreal. Their starting 11 was far from their best 11. What do you make of that, Alex? Do you think that I mean, I saw some comments on like, they disrespected Forge, similar to the Whitecaps, which we'll get to. But this is the second leg. You're not going into it with a comfortable, 3-0 advantage, even a 2-1 advantage. You drew in Hamilton. You're going back home. It's the game is still up in the air, and you didn't go with your best 11, and it showed 25 minutes in. Like I said, Forge came out flying. They had that lead, and then they could just go into game management mode. Obviously, I guess the question is, do you think that's a massive mistake? And do you think that CF Montreal disrespected Forge a little bit with that lineup?
Yes and no. I think, yes, they definitely, it feels like they underestimated Forge. Definitely, leaving out the likes of a Waterman. I think, of course, he would have always been a useful presence out there. Maybe Samuel Piet could have gotten a start. At the same time, I think this is just an indictment of Montreal's depth. Because if you think about it, Sebastian Breza, he was always going to get the Cup goalkeeping honors. And look, he won the 2021 Can Champ MVP. He was Wilfred Nancy's guy for much of 2022 when they had such an excellent season. So yes, while Jonathan Sierra is the clear number 1 for good reason, it's not like Breza is, some unproven slouch. You look at the back 3, Campbell's been starting a lot. Corbo's been Sosa was the one rotated guy in midfield. I mean, Victor Wanyama, he's the team's only DP, makes $1.8 million a year. Rita Zuhir has deserved more of a shot, and he was one of the bright lights, I did feel like. Mathieu Chouanier is the captain in the heartbeat. He starts every game. Bryce Duke is someone who's been starting a lot of games. Yankov was someone that brought in to start games. I don't know. I'm looking at this lineup. It's not like, Montreal could have easily dropped in a few more academy guys, right? Like Alessandro Biello could have gotten a start. I think this is also as much an indictment of Montreal's depth. And I think it's not so much that Courtois disrespect them with the choice of players, but I do think for a team coming off a 5-1 drubbing at the hands of TFC, this would have been the perfect chance to throw out your big guns. Like, all right, this is a response. If you go out and lose a game like this, all right, that's on you. Whereas the fact that he rotated his squad so heavily, the club's already in a bit of a moment of low confidence. This kind of exposed some of their issues with depth, issues with mentality. That's the bigger worry. It wasn't so much the actual players, but kind of especially I think the TFC game has to be mentioned in the context of where things got wrong. Because I think as a club, if you're Montreal, a loss like TFC, it almost affirms the need to want to go and win this cup even more. And the fact that they're just like, all right, we'll treat it like any other cup match. No, you weren't in a sort of context or situation where you could get away with that. And ultimately, they ended up paying the price.
Also could be your best and maybe only chance to get into the CONCACAF Champions Cup, considering your league form right now. I'd be surprised. I mean, I know MLS is very forgiving. You never know. They could get on a bit of a run. They could push back for a playoff spot. Most teams in the league do make the playoffs, but you get my point. Is it looks more likely that they will miss out than have the opportunity. And this is only a few games. Like the Can Champ isn't a massive tournament in terms of, starting at a round of 64 and working your way up. They added the double legs, but this is a good opportunity and a short opportunity to push on and go for this competition. And unfortunately for them, they fell short. And I agree, Alex. I mean, getting pumped 5-1 like that, it's a horrible, horrible look. You'd want to, instead of doubling down, to now look back and be like, all right, we just lost to TFC 5-1 and then followed it up by getting eliminated against Forge in the Canadian Championship quarterfinals, sitting with a 3-3-7 record. Nothing's really looking up right now, where at least if you would have got that result, you could have been like, all right, we're still pushing for the CONCACAF Champions Cup, the Can Champ. Like, this could be, we could turn this season around, and now it's in a bit of trouble, and the fans are not happy. As I have a clip to show you guys here. I'm not sure exactly how much we're going to watch of it because it's 6 minutes, but it's a very intriguing watch. So we'll give you guys a little context and we'll go into it here.
In everything that's transpired over recent weeks, whether something like this will cost Laurent Courtois his job. That is the undeniable conversation right now. Got some great footage from our One Soccer team. Samuel Piette, longtime captain of this club, the local face of what CF Montreal is all about, discussing with supporters. We don't know what he's chatting with them about. The fans decided not to cheer, be silent, to protest against the club in the first half. Unfortunately, when that happens, and it wouldn't take anything away from the fans and how serious this matter is, but who loses in that scenario are the players. They have a home game in the first half where it was eerie and lifeless.
But that was the point, though,
exactly.
Right? That was the 100%. Absolute point.
And you see it, unacceptable. And that's what they're saying about the club right now. Unfortunately, it's a guy like Piette, one of the good guys in the game, that has to front up and face this in times like this.
I will say this is very cordial. It's almost like they're pleading cases, stating their points, because if you remember, it was almost a year ago at this time that things were so bad between Toronto FC and their fan base. And a fan threw a megaphone at Marc-Anthony Kaye when the players and supporters group got into it. This looks more like a little bit of a conversation, because I can understand where the fans are coming from. You feel completely helpless. Again, this has been years of turmoil and talk and turnover and disgruntled players and disgruntled former employees taking to Twitter saying things are, if you think they're chaotic, what you're hearing about, you don't even know the half of it behind the scenes.
Those are some pretty damning evidence, I guess, right there. I mean, it's tough. And I remember when the megaphone incident happened with Marc-Anthony Kaye, CF Montreal fans, having a chuckle. It wasn't just CF Montreal fans. A lot of the league was having a chuckle at the state that TFC was in. And it's funny when it's not happening to you, but it's heartbreaking when it does. And I think disgruntled's probably the word to use. The fans looked furious. They don't know how to express themselves. So they're trying to figure out ways, and that the way that they're protesting, and now after they want to have their thoughts heard. I mean, I give huge credit to Sam Piette for going up there and trying to communicate and trying to turn this situation around, but it's just toxic. I guess I don't really have another word. Alex, what did you make of it? It's sad. You feel for the fans, you feel for the players, and you just really feel for the whole situation for the club.
Yeah, it's a tough situation because it's tough for the players, but also as the fans, right? Like, they're the life beat of the heartbeat of the club. They're the reason why the sport is so special, that when things aren't going right, they certainly it's not unreasonable for them to share their perspective. And that's sometimes the unique part of this sport, is that you can have these direct dialogues. At least no one was hurt, no microphones were thrown. I think someone was saying in Montreal, Samuel Piette gave his jersey to a fan afterwards in that group. So obviously I mean, if you're a fan, you can't be really going after a Piette or a Chouanier. Those are the two guys who show up every week, work hard, head down local guys committed to the club. Like Choinière was working his tail off from minute 1 to minute 90 yesterday, and Piet as well when he came in. Those are definitely not the problem with the club, but it's a tough point. I thought it was very interesting sitting in the press conference yesterday and hearing the Choinière's comments. Of course, he was asked about what happened, and he said, "Look, the supporters told us it was unacceptable, and they're right. We saw the banner during the game. Where we're not oblivious to it. It's unacceptable right now after the loss to TFC and now this, and we agree that they have to be better. They have to work harder." He said that's been the big thing, that they have to look in the mirror, that no tactics, no X and X can change things, that it's up to the players to look in the mirror, work harder, get after it. That it's a tough moment right now in the locker room, and they need to turn things around. So I thought his comments were very blunt, very honest from the captain, and credit to him to stepping up in a tough moment like that. So yeah, definitely for Montreal, it's a bit of a tough situation, because I think the biggest thing they'll have to answer is where now, right? Choinière saying it's the players. I think if you're Laurent Courtois, you're probably putting a bunch of the blame on yourself. If you're the fans, you're looking at the owner. Like, there's so many different ways you can look at it, and I guess the reality, it's probably a bit of each column. But for a club like Montreal, given where they were just a few years ago, I guess the good news is things can turn around quick. Like you mentioned, less than 12 months ago, TFC fans were throwing microphones around, and now they're into the semifinals of the Canadian Championship. They're they're top, one of the top teams in MLS. Culture there is completely reset, but for Montreal, that's the hard part, resetting that culture. Where does that start? Because you also have to kind of figure out what the problem was with TFC. They decided that the leadership need to come in, reset the locker room. Herdman's done that. With Courtois, he's seemed to be a strong figure in terms of building that culture and whatnot. So it really does feel like it's beyond him and even the dressing room in terms of what's wrong right now.
Yeah, there's not a lot of positive things going on at CF Montreal. I'm going to say this with a little tongue-in-cheek that I think was a pretty nice moment for Bobby Chmerniotis, who was linked to the CF Montreal job. Remember that a couple years ago, before I think Hernan Lozada ended up getting it.
So twice. He also interviewed this offseason as well, it sounded like.
So I don't know.
Was talked to.
It's a pretty nice little moment for him, especially if he was up for the Canadian men's national team job. Obviously, didn't get that to Jesse Marsh. So to have this moment right now probably is pretty nice for him. But unfortunately for CF Montreal, I mean, there's issues that go deep into this team and this organization. I feel for them. I don't know exactly how they're going to turn around. There's a couple comments here that are kind of similar, and I don't know how realistic it is. You and I can just kind of put our 2 cents in, Alex, but like you mentioned, they have one DP right now, that's Victor Wanyama, who's just not good enough at this level if you want to compete at all. And we got a couple comments saying, when will Montreal get some amazing players again? And obviously talked about a player like Piatti, who was incredible for them, Didier Drogba as well. And then there's another comment in here, disappointing because the club has some real talent, but the big dogs upstairs aren't giving much up. So I guess my final question before we move on, Alex, to the Whitecaps and Cavalry matchup is, do you expect CS Montreal to one day dip back into their pockets for some DP? Do you think that, the fan protests, the results, something is going to give where, the Saputo family is going to dip in their pocket and bring in a couple players, which, would help this team massively? Or do you think that it's going to be same old, or maybe they bring in like one okay player just to try to give the fans a little something? I don't really know. I do think this squad needs a little refresh, but I just don't know if and when it'll happen.
Yeah, I'd like to be optimistic. I just struggle to see so, just based on the last few years, right? Of like, I'll preface by saying I love Moneyball. I love that book. I've read it like 6 times, watched the movie a couple times, read Soccernomics. I love all that sort of idea of like maximizing value and finding market inefficiencies. And that's one of the unique parts of an MLS, which, versus a Europe, is that when there's a certain cap, it puts emphasis on those who can extract every bit of value from the cap. So I've always been fascinated by watching the Philadelphia Union, for example, in their heyday, how they manage that balance of finding your Aaronsons and McKenzies and all these great players they had in their academy, balancing them with timely signings, getting Kai Wagner's and all these sorts of players out of lower divisions, and then complementing them with DPs. And I thought Montreal nailed it in 2022. Their team was such a fun team to watch. They had top end talent. They had youngsters out of the academy. They had local players. They had Canadians. Like, they found Kamal Miller as a left back and turned him into a center back. Joel Waterman out of the CPL. They were a fun team to watch. And what I think is forgotten in Moneyball is when you sell players, that's the point. You kind of you build it up and then you're able to replenish the thing. And I think the fact that they sold Mihailovic, Johnston, and Kone for, I think it was over 15 million, that was a huge moment for the club, because there you reinvest a portion of that in the squad, 2-3 million. You bring in another DP, you bring in a couple impact players, boom. You forget that the Mihailovic, Kone, Johnston loss. I think the fact is that since then, they haven't really reinvested in the squad, haven't been willing to pay the big fees, big salaries. Schwanier asked for a raise. Nope. Meanwhile, Wanyama's on the books sitting there, become a bench player. That, I think also, for example, the MLS Next Pro. Look, Montreal has every right to not want to play an MLS Next Pro. That's their decision. But the fact that they've said, no, it's for money, we don't want to pay the fees that are associated with being in that league, all that sorts of stuff. You just can't afford to do all of that in this game. You need to be willing to sink some resources in. And I think that's the big worry for Montreal, is that the sign is they just don't seem willing to, even when they're selling guys on, and have the coffers there, especially Bologna, Joey Saputa's other teams just made the Champions League. That windfall is usually upwards of 50 million, I think it is. They're probably going to sell some guys like Joshua Zirkzee for a decent amount of money. Thiago Motta as well might move on to Juventus and will command a decent fee as a coach. So the money's there. That's the bigger concern. So it's like, you have to invest. You don't have to invest a whole lot. You can win an MLS with a $18 million budget, but you have to be willing to spend it sparred on a few DPs and then spread the rest around. You can be, thrifty with the bottom end of your roster, bring in some academy guys, some CPL guys, maybe to round things out. But what I'm worried about with Montreal is that it's just been constantly bargain bin across the lineup, and that's going to catch up to you. And I think we've kind of seen that this year.
So, Alex, let's switch our attention. We spent a lot of time on the Forge CF Montreal match, as we should. I mean, it was a big upset. It was a good story. But we got some other comments in here, and we're going to go into the Whitecaps and Cavalry matchup, where another CPL team was also able to pick up a win, 1-0. I saw such a good tweet from, I can't remember, I think it was Charlie Trafford. I think the tweet said, "We won, but we tied, but we lost." And if you look at the tweet, what it means is obviously they won the match 1-0, but they tied on aggregate, but they lost on away goals. And I thought it was such a perfect tweet, and it cracked me up. But I do want to start, Alex, because there's a couple comments coming in here. The first one was talking about here from Andrew. 2 CPL teams have beaten 2 MLS teams this week. The gap is smaller than people think. And then we got a little bit of love. I lost where it was, but that's essentially where we are going to begin. But Alex said something to me before the show kicked off, saying that the conversation isn't that the Canadian Premier League is better than Major League Soccer. And I don't think we should have that conversation, because that's not the case. However, Alex, as we saw with CF Montreal, and we also saw with the Whitecaps, when you don't play your starting 11 and you take maybe a result or a team for granted, you could be put under a little bit of trouble. The Whitecaps, I would say, went with a weaker starting 11, would you say, than CF Montreal did? And they were almost punished for it, losing that match 1-0 against a very hungry Cavalry side. So do you want to talk about that, the sentence that you said there a little bit, that you mentioned to me, saying, like, we shouldn't have the conversation, but the top end talent of the Canadian Premier League is good enough to be, I think, what do you say, 9, 10, 11 spot on MLS sides? And if you're not willing to go to bat with all your best players in Major League Soccer that aren't available, you could be in a little bit of trouble, which the Whitecaps were. So where do you want to begin?
Yeah, no, I think it's important to remember, because, you can easily get caught up the same way when CS Saint Laurent beat Halifax. League One Canada is better than CPL. There's a lot of overlap, but, of course, League One Canada as a whole isn't better than CPL. Certainly there's players, coaches, even clubs who could make the jump up to the CPL and make some noise, do some damage. But that's not the conversation. That's not helpful to anyone either. Ditto with CPL to MLS. Yes, a couple CPL teams beat MLS teams this week. That's not to say the CPL is better than MLS. MLS has been around longer. there's more money in the league, salaries are higher, which are all past indicators, in soccernomics, if you want to go there, of strong leagues. That's not at all the conversation. But I think for the health of League One Canada, the health of the CPL, to begin, before they become anything, or not become anything, but before they come the league they want to be in 5, 10, 15, 20 years, a big place to start is moving talent upwards. And I think what this shows with League One and now to CPL to MLS is that there are players at each level who deserve to move up. And I think you mentioned it perfectly there. In MLS, yes, there's 3 DPs, there's 3 U22 players. Usually those guys may bring in upwards of $600,000 a year. There's a bunch of others with TAM that make more. Look, there's no one saying that some of the players on Cavalry, no one's saying, they're better than Ryan Gauld. No, Ryan Gauld is one of the best players in MLS. But when you're looking at, say, a Dan Klomp versus some of the Whitecaps center back depth, could you not make the argument that Klomp could be in that mix to be a squad player on the Whitecaps? You can. And I think that's where the discussion needs to be, that, all right, is maybe the CPL being ignored in terms of some of the talent that can move upward, and is CPL ignoring some of the League One talent that could also move upwards? Because I think ultimately that's what happens in England when there's been all sorts of upsets. When a championship side beats a Premier League, or even League One, League Two sides beat Premier League sides, championship sides, no one's like, the system there is broken, the Premier League sucks, the championship's better. No, a lot of those players end up moving up through the ranks because they deserve so. Of course, the system's been around longer, they have promotion relegation, they have more levers that can activate movement between the levels. But there's room for movement, and I think what this week shows that room for movement should exist in the Canadian soccer pyramid, in the sense that there are players in League One who could even play as high as MLS, but just to get there, they need to start with the CPL, and ditto with CPL to MLS. And I feel like the fact that 2 CPL teams kind of got disrespected by getting thrown B teams at them, and they went out and beat them, it shows that, okay, there's value there. And I think the biggest thing too, this is just another whole other discussion aside, from MLS teams, there's no reason not to, because you look at some of the depth pieces they have, right? Like CF Montreal, a couple of $300, $400K depth guys. Same with the Whitecaps. Why not go get a CPL guy at $100, $200K? Like Joel Waterman is now a starting CB in MLS, and he's up, I think, just finally hit $350K in terms of his salary. Does that not scream better value too for a domestic player? Anyways, it's also not just a matter of, CPL deserving a shot. It's also a genuine question of, are you ignoring value that is there to be mined? And I think that's been something that's been lost in this whole discussion, where you compare the leagues. No, forget the comparison of the leagues. You need to start opening up the movement of pathways to get these guys deserving shots.
I agree. Now we're gonna switch gears just a touch, Alex, and I'm going to bring up that's just perfect timing. This came in 2 seconds before I was going to share this, but where is the tweet from Mark Noonan? There it is. So I want to give some. I think we should give some context because a certain Whitecaps manager said losing in the Canadian Championship against a Premier League opposition is shameful. But I think, Alex, maybe you wanted to add a little bit more context quickly before I go into Mark's tweet there on what Vanny had to say.
Yeah, I think it was just more the fact that genuinely, in terms of effort and execution, that was probably the worst Whitecaps performance in his tenure. So I think that was kind of the context. He did give a lot of praise to Cavalry. He mentioned that he thought Cavalry deserved to go to penalties. He thought that Cavalry was the better team on the day. He gave them a lot of praise. I think from this perspective, the bigger comments were more from Montreal, because Montreal obviously are very frustrated with themselves. A lot of the blame was blamed on themselves. I didn't hear much. Again, maybe I'd have to listen back, but there was less praise of Forge and more just like, we're ashamed, this is a very low moment. I think that's more of an accurate reception, whereas the Whitecaps were like, look, we were very, very poor, but Cavalry was very good and nearly punished it for it. I think that was kind of the slight difference.
So with that context, though, just because I think it was important to what Mark's going to say, though, he said, I'm surprised by the narrative by MLS Canada clubs when losing to Canadian Premier League clubs in the Canadian Championship. Words like shameful and I'm ashamed make no sense to me. Like MLS, we are a FIFA D1 league. Yes, we are a lot younger, but produce a good standard. No shame in that. What do you make of Mark's comment? They got quite a few Got quite like go through some of the comments here.
Me too.
We got I like I said, there would needed to be context around what Danny was saying as well. But yeah, I think it's I think it's a little disrespectful to look at these teams and say, it's shameful to lose or I'm ashamed, especially when like the Forge is the perfect example. They were the better team. Like I think they absolutely deserve to go through. If you're not gonna play, I mean, and we said CF Montreal played a better lineup than the Whitecaps did, still couldn't get it done at home. And that's just looking in the mirror. But I somewhat agree, like pretty much with what Mark's saying. I don't know. What do you think, Alex?
Yeah, I mean, first off, Luis mentions it in the comments. Of course, Mark Noonan is the commissioner of the Canadian Premier League. He's going to promote his product. I think that's also worth mentioning. May as well. It's a great week for the league. I mean, huge moment to be proud of, going and beating two MLS teams. Forget beating two MLS teams in their own building. One losing on away goals, one winning outright the tie. That's a massive achievement for a young league. A league you have to remember is in the 6th year of existence, operating at a fraction of the budget of the MLS teams. Of course, it's going to promote that. But hey, it leads to the point we were saying earlier of, again, the level between the overall level between the leagues is large because of DPs and the financial aspect. But again, it's that question of the overlap. A lot of the mid to top end of the CPL is not that far off from the mid to bottom end of MLS. And that's why, it's been said guys deserve shots, because then you get situations like Joel Waterman, Mo Farsi, who get that shot and they end up being pretty darn good MLS contributors. Lucas McNaughton. Yes, some have failed, right? Some have gone MLS Next Pro, haven't stuck, and have gone back to the CPL. You saw that with, a few players over the years. But they deserve a shot. And I think what Mark's comments are pointing at, it shows this week that you cannot underestimate. You can't. The league is at a point where you need to respect it. And that's good, because now in cup competition, that gives them an advantage, because heading into these sorts of games, hey, you're never going to have nothing to lose, right? You never have anything to lose as a lower league team against, the MLS teams are always, if they're not making the semifinals or the final, it's a disappointment for them. Well, if you're the CPL team, well, you can either say like, look, you put out the A team and you beat us, well, that's what's expected to happen, or you underestimate, you rotate. They believe that they can win, and it's a result. And it's only a win-win for the CPL team. So I think his comments, maybe it just kind of gets lost in everything because, he is the commissioner and the context of the other comments. But I think it's perfectly valid to say that this was a big week for the CPL, and it shows that MLS teams have no business underestimating teams anymore, especially with, again, the huge problem that MLS faces and why they struggle to compete with the Liga MX is they need to figure out ways to make the depth of the league better. And I think in moments like this, it shows that, the depth of the league is what's holding MLS back from their ambition. That's without even talking about what CPL and whatnot. And CPL showing that, look, in terms of the overall level of the league, they're not that far off from some of these discussions.
Absolutely. We got a few comments coming in. We also might have Sofian joining us, Alex. So I'm just trying to switch gears and decide whether we want to go to the women's national team roster drop right now before he gets on. I'm not 100% sure when he's going to jump on here, but I'm just going to go through a couple of comments here quickly. We got well said. Right now in the Canadian Premier League, there's an opportunity to develop 4 teams and turn them into elite clubs in the Canadian soccer landscape. Forge, Ottawa Pacific, and Cavalry. These clubs have an opportunity. What do you make of that one, Alex? I think someone did. So it didn't include Halifax, which I had noticed right away, but someone else jumped on that, said for sure even Halifax from I know Halifax isn't in a great moment right now, but I would say the infrastructure and the fan base is there to definitely push on for them.
I guess you could throw everyone in that mix.
Yeah,
York has the potential. Yeah. Vancouver, of course, Valor has some work to do, but in an ideal scenario, CFL ownership, if everything got right, Valor in that mix, like everyone across the board.
Yeah, giving love to each CPL club. I agree. Everyone's got something to. Even when we thought Valor was dead and buried, they found a way to pick up a big win against Halifax, the team that was on such a rise. I think all teams have something to look forward to right now. Some maybe in a couple years from now, but bold of you to assume that Valor is even around in a couple of years. Vincent's not having it. I don't think that's going to happen. I think Valor's got some good things to look forward to. I think they're just struggling a little bit in terms of performances, and hopefully with Phil there, and they can steer the ship a little bit. You talk about Moneyball right now with rosters in this league. I think maybe Valor could fall under that. But Phil's done some pretty good work, so I'm hoping for a bit of a turnaround there. But Alex, doesn't look like Sofian's jumping on right at the moment, so we're going to quickly shift over and discuss the Canadian Women's National Team roster that was just dropped. So let's pull that up. And Alex, any surprises? I was going to look for your tweet, but I'm just going to actually just toss up the actual roster itself, and we can go through some of the players. You mentioned in your tweet a couple notable applicants. Who did you say? I'm going to pull up your tweet. You mentioned some of the injuries. I just don't have them right in front of me. I don't remember exactly who they were.
Yeah, well, I think the two injuries that are missing out, Quinn is one of them, and the other one is... Like I
said, I saw you tweet it. Sydney Collins.
Sydney Collins,
yeah.
Of course. I think that's two interesting omissions. I think Collins, something important to note with this camp, Canada, it's been reported that they'll announce their squad on July 3rd for the Olympics. They're 18 plus 4 alternates. They then have a July window. They haven't announced the fixtures for. My bet is they'll be in Europe, so they can just go straight to France afterwards. So this is their last window before they announce their Olympic squad. So pretty much anyone who's not already in this, I just struggle to see making it. So that's big from Collins's perspective, just because she hasn't looked close to making a return for North Carolina. So I think you can kind of say the writing on the wall there. It's also a bit worrying for Quinn, who got injured. I checked. It's wild to think it's been that long. It's been exactly a month since they got injured. Really, there hasn't been much of an update beyond knee injury. There hasn't been like out for the season or anything like that, but there hasn't been any indication of a return. I think that one, you just because there hasn't been no update, you're waiting for something, but I just don't feel very optimistic about that. And of course, for anyone else who missed out, I'm not surprised. Of course, I would have loved to see her, but Mary-Yasmin Aladou, Bev Priestman is already, I think it's something for Bev Priestman. If this is a World Cup squad and you have that extra flexibility, Aladou's in here and you're giving her a look. But the reality is, Priestman already has enough to figure out up front that throwing another body into the mix when, for whatever reason, Aladou hasn't fit the squad. You can agree with it. I disagree. I would love to see Aladou get a look, but Priestman doesn't feel she's in the plans. No point in bringing her around and, making the competition harder. It's better to clear things out. So I get that from Priestman's perspective. So yeah, really the big thing is I'm focused on the players that are here, and a few really stand out in particular. I think if you're starting at wingback, the battle between Gabrielle Carl and Jade Riviere will both make it to the Olympics. It feels like right now one might. I'd love to see both make it in. Seeing them compete against each other would be huge because Carl's been in phenomenal form. Riviere, though, when she's healthy, she's put up some top performances. Then in midfield, if Quinn's out, is Desiree Scott fit enough to play? Because she's hardly played for KC. Or is Emma Reagan going to sneak in and grab a spot? And then, of course, what the heck goes on up front? There's just so many, some of Priestman's favored players, like just players that she has more familiarity with, like Deanne Rose has struggled to get minutes for Leicester. Jordan Hoyden was coming off an injury. Nichelle Prince coming back from an injury and has struggled a bit. Whereas Olivia Smith is in great form. Eveline Viens is in phenomenal form, and I think it's the most informed Canadian player right now. Do those two get more minutes and get a legit shot to earn spots in the Olympic squad? Whereas like a Viens just always has struggled to earn a regular role under Priestman. Is this the camp that finally changes? So those are a few things I'm watching.
So Alex, try to get in as much information as he possibly could, because Sofian did just join us behind the scenes. So that was just a quick little mention on the women's roster that was dropped, the exciting tournament ahead, the defending gold medal champions. So for right now, we are going to finish off the episode talking with Sofian and going back to the CF Montreal and Forge topics. So get any questions you guys have in the chat right now. I'll try to make it CF Montreal focused if you want, around the club, the players, the fans, whatever it may be. And we're going to welcome in Sofian right now. Sofian, how you doing today, my man?
Hey guys. I'm good. What did I miss?
We had a nice... We were trying to section up the stream into 4 parts, but the CF Montreal against Forge matchup took a big chunk of it. We just are now circling back to it because we were lucky enough to be joined by yourself today. So Alex and I are just going to think of some questions on the spot. I mentioned to the chat if anyone has any questions around the club, players, anything to do with CF Montreal and their performance and their position within the league, and just anything going on with the club, get it in the chat, because we were kind of talking about the fact that there's not a lot to be positive for right now if you're CF Montreal supporter, given the league form. They're 3-3-7. They've conceded the second most goals only to the Earthquakes. They've just been bounced out of the Canadian Championship quarterfinals against Forge. Issues with Chouanière, the Renard story. I mean, there's just a lot going on right now at this club. So, Sophie, the first question I want to ask you is just hearing from the fan perspective, because we just watched a clip that One Soccer shared with Piet going up to the fans and talking with them, and it looked like a pretty heated kind of back and forth going on there. He ended up giving his kit to one of the guys in the fans, but I want to hear your thought from the fan perspective right now. What's the latest, and I guess how angry is everybody?
Well, everyone's angry, and to be honest, at least the fans, is a bit of a confusion, right? Because when I think about it, are we looking at symptoms or root causes right now? Are these symptoms of something else? I'm saying that's always as much of the question. And the whole Olivier Renard, Chouanière saga seems to be symptoms of something deeper, and we know where it is. The ownership group and the president didn't see eye to eye with Renard and the sporting direction, which is fine, but it's more the way events happen. So it seems like a tsunami. And it is in this small ecosystem that CF Montreal is. It's just, and it doesn't help that the club, how do I say this? In the context of just the game, I don't see how we can talk about issues the club is having without saying that they're missing Poku, Kokara, Martinez. Basically, the biggest offensive investments they had since, I suppose, Drogba, Zemaili, Taida, maybe if you see him as an offensive player. It's a big investment they did, transfer-wise and also salary-wise. So just with that, you're losing your offensive capacity to play up high, which is what Renard wants, and to do quick transition like Nashville if you want to. So sporting-wise, it's difficult. You add the Chouanière saga. So, okay, what's going on? Is this affect one player? Is it affecting everyone? Is it a culture? Is it an environment? And the Renard, then the Olivier Renard parting ways with just shows it's something deeper than that. So I look at the players. Is this Toronto was too strong? Probably. Was also are they not depressed, but are they tired mentally? Are they? I don't want to make the end of this beautiful life depressing, but it's more like I'm asking myself these questions. It's like the game is the game. Corto will find a solution. The players are down. They'll figure out eventually. There's no relegation, so you can try and play your style of game and hopefully build something. But my conspiracy theorist and myself deep inside tells me, where is the club heading? Now there's no Renard was the soccer guy, the football guy. Who's the football guy or guys or gals? Who's the football team is gonna decide of the future the next 3 months for the next mercato, transfer market, and the next 2-3 years? What's the vision? Is Corto part of that vision? I'm not saying there's anything happening, but when there's a big change, you think to yourself, well, is everyone impacted or not? So it's all the question I ask myself: am I looking at a symptom or a root cause? And what the fans are going through is normal. It's visceral. It's day to day, delivered day to day, minute by minute. Especially with social media now. I'm old enough to remember that you had to look at forums at best to have an instant reaction, and maybe read the newspaper if you're a bit younger. Now with social media, it's instant reaction. You get your opinion is out there. One Soccer has an opinion right now, and other channels too. So how do you digest that, and how do you separate the field and off the field? Obviously, there's an impact between both, but yeah, that's my take.
So from the fans then, what do you think the number one question that they want answered is? Is it what the root cause? Is that what you're saying? Like, what is like?
Well, they want someone to speak up. The root cause, they know it's always going to be the ownership. They decide whatever they want to decide. This is not new. The thing is, this is not specific to Montreal. Most other clubs in the world have the same, I wouldn't say issues, but modus operandi. An owner will want to do whatever he wants. Eventually, if he wants to implicate himself. Also, it's just speculation. I'm not saying this is a fact, but what Olivier Renard said to the media when he departed was, there was a difference in the way difference in the way we worked. So if someone is interfering with his work, it's okay. I'm done. I'm not gonna play this game, which is fine. And the club has the right to do that. They own the club. You do whatever you want, as long as they accept the consequences. What the fans want more clarity, more investments, because it's always the lowest budget in the league almost all the time. Maybe even in salaries, even more in transfers. There's the famous out-of-pocket expenses, transfers and bonus and stuff. So the fans want more investment into the team, especially in a team that needs that could easily dominate the market, sporting-wise, in the summer. There's no Montreal Canadiens. The Alouettes are big, but not big enough to have to dominate Montreal. They can both share the market, media, during the summer. So fans need more direction, and Olivier Renard represented that solid sporting direction, for sporting philosophy that he brought after the Nick DeSantis era. So they were used to a sort of like rhythm, the same style, the same kind of mentality. They were frustrated with the fact that he wasn't buying big time players. That wasn't his mandate. So I think they need they need someone to speak up beyond what Gabriel Chavez said, a bit too vague when they let go of, when they parted ways with Olivier Renard. So they need someone to talk and say clear, this is what we're gonna do. This is how we're gonna do things, and they're not gonna do that until they hire a new sporting director. And I thought the ownership group will talk. So they want, I think, I'm not gonna speak for them, but I think they want clarification. What is going on? You gave us 4 years of caviar with Renard. It wasn't perfect. He made mistakes. He knows that too. But we need, what's the next 4 years gonna look like?
I guess, Sofiane, obviously the big news this week. Pick and choose. You got the 5-1 derby loss to TFC.
Yeah.
You got now this loss to Forge. We asked it earlier, so I mean we'll go right into it. Is this rock bottom right now for this iteration of CF Montreal?
Is this rock bottom? Yes, like you can't go lower than that. You're just gonna, yeah. Is it rock bottom for the fans, people who observe the club, some media members? Yes. Is it rock bottom for the club? Not very far. I'm not sure, but they're not very far. And the club's not going to make any moves until they know where they're going. I'm not sure what their vision is. When I say club, I mean, the board, the famous board that manages the club. And that will be executed via Gabriel Gervais. Rock bottom. It's
tough question.
It's a tough question because you could always go deeper. You can lose more games. But your question is great because the context. What is the context? Are we going the Corto way for 2-3 years and build and play a style of game, a style of play that's like, no matter who's going to play for me, it will be that way, and we'll do a sort of Wilfred Nancy 2.0, maybe not as good, but sort of vision, or are going to reset again? And I think I can speak for myself, so I won't project to everyone that's listening, but I feel that there is a, how do I say, let's wait and see. People are just waiting because something's going to happen. Someone's going to get let go, or they're going to hire new sporting directors. Someone's going to make a move. So I think we're all in a holding pattern, I think, at this point.
So do you think Courtois' So you're saying Courtois' job may not be safe. I mean, the results indicate maybe it's not safe, but you're saying maybe if a new sporting director comes in and he has a different vision, maybe Courtois is one of the ones that's sacrificed, or
it could be. I'm just playing devil's advocate, saying to myself, if you're not into the Olivier now way of working, or the way you are working as the board is impeding his work, so he has to leave. What does it say about the rest of your staff? It's more like, correlation is not causation, but I'm like, where are we in that process? And I don't think he's a bad coach. He seems to be a good coach, but maybe they know things that we don't know about the way he handles players. Maybe he's not a great man manager, which I doubt, player manager, which I doubt. But what is exactly, how do they evaluate him? Because they always have evaluating through the eye of Olivier Renard. He recommended that guy, we approved, but how do they see him now and the staff without Olivier Renard? I think that changes the perspective. I'm speculating again. I don't want to put gas on the fire. It's more like, what is really the vision of this club? Because they need to reiterate to everyone, because we don't know. Like, we know we need to buy young players, sell them for profit. Like most clubs, outside Real Madrid, Barca, like the top 20 clubs in the world, 30, everyone's buying and selling to make money and try and survive. Most clubs, at least that's on MLS. So where are you specifically in that vision? Because this club is mature enough beyond telling us generic stuff like we want to win games and buy and sell players. Yeah, everyone does that. Where are you exactly in your identity? You want to have only Quebecois players? Are you a Atletico Bilbao style? Are you Real Sociedad beforehand? What is your identity? Is it just the Quebecois? Is it just Canadian? Is it just cheaper players that can resell? You gotta be more specific now without Olivier Renard and really lay it out for us so we know.
So I guess some of that decisions will happen once a new sporting director comes in. So
yeah.
I guess in the immediate future, when you're looking at Courtois and his situation, what would you think? What would the next, let's say, 6 months, as long as like a new sporting director doesn't maybe
Yeah.
come in and want to rock the boat this season, but
Yeah.
what do you think Courtois needs to do to try to prove that he needs to stay? Like for example, is it playoff or bust? Is it just getting his system implemented to these players?
Yeah.
Is it like, what are you looking for from him for the remainder of the season now?
But he needs to rebuild the confidence. Right now, the confidence is shattered. The Toronto FC game really destroyed him. I don't know if the Chouanière saga didn't help some players. I'm not sure. But he needs to rebuild the confidence. The next 3-4 games, just rebuild the confidence, play tight, don't concede many goals, keep it simple, and then build up on that. Because there are skills on this team. Yes, they're missing Poku, Kokaro, Martinez, which I think is underestimated. We talk about like if it's nothing. Like I would like to ask LAFC if they lost Vela and Bouanga last year at the same time for like 3-4 months. I think it's it's very difficult. Or Vancouver for Ryan Gauld or whoever you want to choose. And I think they need to keep it simple. And I think he probably overestimated how this team was ready. I think he said a few times he overestimated that the team is not as ready, as far ahead as he thought they were. Meaning, he needs to learn. He's learning himself the job of being a head coach of a first team in a senior level. So he needs to adjust. But I think he's going to keep it simple. Probably play defensive to be able to get some confidence back, and then build up to that style that we saw when Kokaro and Martinez were there. Transition or build up high and pressing. But he needs to keep it simple at this point. They can't go fancy right now. They don't have players to be fancy offensively, so they need to keep it simple.
Well, I guess to that point about Courtois, do you feel maybe he was a bit, I guess it might be a bit harsh, but it's a question to ask. Was he a bit naive in this game? Because at the same time, you mentioned the offensive players not being there. That's not been a new problem. Like Kokaro's been out for weeks now. Martinez, Poku, they've been out for weeks, months, even in Poku's case.
Yep.
The fact that Forge was able to come in to Saputo and play through them like butter, the high line, the fact that he wasn't able to adjust, was that maybe a bit of naivety on Courtois' part and something that is concerning, you'd say?
There is naivety, but there's the context. I think the context, he could put the, Postecoglou or Pep Guardiola plan if you wanted to. I think the execution wasn't even close to be able to play decent football, soccer, to be able to go after a Forge team that's been waiting for this opportunity. We gotta get Montreal. Well, third or fourth time was a charm, and they made it happen. It was a perfect store for them. And Bobby Spinoris, doesn't care. Like, your form is your form, but I gotta take care of myself and my team. They did their job, and I think mentally something's happening with this club, with these players, and I think we see it in the game a little bit. There's no motivation. The second half and the 2-hour break helped a lot. We saw, okay, if you played half with this heavy intensity in the first half, you would have won the game easily against Forge, I think. But it didn't happen. Forge did their job. Congratulations. There was probably some critique on the way he manages the game, probably, and how he decides to make changes and how maybe he switched it up. But I think mentally the squad is not in a good mental health in a way, like to be able to be 100% all in. Think that they showed at the beginning of the season during that 6-7 game road trip. So they need some yoga, some zen, and maybe go out for a steak and bowling, whatever they need to do. They need to reset. Because they know how to play. They just offensively they can't do it as much, but they're not that bad. They're not good anymore, that's for sure.
They need a poutine as a team, is what I say.
Poutine, steak, let's do it.
But I was just kind of asking as like a follow-up. I just mean because it's not like this game was an isolation or it came out of nowhere, right? Because it happens sometimes. Like, you're in a good form. It was like when Whitecaps lost to Pacific. They just beat LAFC at the game before, and then they lost to Pacific. Sometimes those results just happen. The fact is, especially after the TFC game, I just wonder, because like Courtois, for example, he could have sent a message, put out your regulars, be like, look, yeah, it's Forge, but we take this seriously. Maybe you play a bit more defensive. That's kind of where I was going with the naivety. Do you think that would be fair to look at in the context that maybe Courtois, treated it too much like a cup match? Because in reality, it was so much more than just a simple one-off.
Yeah, he kept the same game plan. I'm gonna do the rotation, keep my best players for Nashville. But at this point, what is his plan? Can he change his rotation that was planned for weeks, because he needs to look at fitness levels, injuries, and such? How do you go from there? So it's a good question, Alex. To be honest, I don't disagree with you. But we need insight from him, because he speaks a lot. He says a lot of things, but lately he's been much more. His answers are much more short than usual, and it shows the mood and the ambiance that's kind of around there. So I still take a deep breath.
All right, we get any questions you have in before we wrap up the stream, but we do have one coming in from a listener. I'll toss it here. It's covering your face, actually, so I won't not actually put it on, but it says, do you think it's realistic for CF Montreal to be competitive with their budget strategy, or is youth development an excuse to be cheap?
Well, both can be true. And I think they showed 2021, 2022 that they can be competitive with a budget strategy, but involves not to be wrong too many times. We're going to go again. The Mialovic, Alistair Johnson, Kamal Miller, all these guys that came in. Goldmine of players that came at the right time. So you need to find these opportunities and execute, but you also need a coaching staff that helps you. Losada kind of like put a break on that a little bit. That wasn't just his fault last year. I think there was other issues happening on the club, including Ronald that maybe overestimated some players that he brought in. The youth development is not necessarily an excuse. It's a it's a reason. That's your identity in your transfer market. We will get players that are more expensive. Martinez was not cheap. Kokaro would have to pay a transfer fee and a good salary, so they're not cheap. They're just not investing as much as the other clubs. And I think many clubs are really overspending a lot vis-a-vis the result they're getting. We're all gonna say, hey, look at Vancouver, look at LAFC, look at Seattle, whatever. Seattle wasn't doing great, but Nashville last year, etc. But there's no one talking about Chicago. What has Chicago done in the past 10 years? They probably spent $100 million in transfer fees in the last 10 years. They haven't done anything. So it's all about relativity and perspective. And I think they show they can do both. And I think you should be able to go back to scouting, go back to identify those players vis-a-vis your identity with the coaching staff, and hopefully that works. But you need to redo that same cycle that you had with Ronald. The first 2 years that were really great, and continue that way.
Yeah, very interesting. I guess kind of one this is just processing. I know we
Sorry,
have
guys.
interesting. No. We have an interesting listener question that I think Josh can throw to you after. But I guess kind of another one for me is like, I guess what's next for CF Montreal. Like, if there's a checklist of what they need to do, is really the sporting director the next big priority? Is it is this summer all of a sudden get a lot more important in terms of player acquisition?
They might get more players now to maybe hide whatever Ronald was saying. Well, they wouldn't spend as much, etc. They won't let me spend. Okay, we're gonna spend. Maybe in spite of him, maybe. They can't move a lot right now. At this point, like you said, sporting director or new sporting department is gonna be key. I think with the name Mark Watson's been going around on Twitter. I'm not sure if it's true or not, but they need to find someone, not necessarily soon, but soon enough so you can be able to be ready for the summer transfer market. If there's a plan for it. If there's no plan, well, just take your time. Take your time and just go on cruise control for sporting wise to be able to let Corto work. Once again, are they evaluating Corto and the staff for this year or not? I don't know, but I'm being like, let's say if I'm very robotic and have no emotions, well, I have to look at every aspect of my sparring department and are the right people there? And I think Corto seems like the right candidate, and the vibe there is pretty good. But even during those losses, a lot of good vibes around the way he coaches and the way he manages practices. But I think the sporting directorship needs to be resolved and spoken to and defined clearly for the fans, the media, and the rest of the people who are observing the club.
All right, final question on the stream today is coming from Vincent, and it's basically asking, can this team win MLS Cup with Saputo as the owner? It seems like his ego has cost him before, potentially with Nancy. So what do you think? With, I guess, the strategy, the way that this team is operated under the Saputos, can this team win?
Can this team win?
Tough question.
No, I gotta read it again. The Vincent Alvarado seems to cost him one position with Nancy. Okay. With the aspect of how the league is, unless you get 4 or 5 Columbus Crew in this league, playing the way they play and dominate, there is a chance. If you have a couple of good transfer markets, have a good sporting vision, like win the MLS Cup, it's not impossible. It's very difficult, but be competitive in the playoffs and go far, even with the Saputos as owners, etc. I don't think it's gonna hinder them going far. Winning a MLS Cup, it's circumstantial. Like at this point, history's telling us no, they will never win a MLS Cup with the way they're operating. But I think with the nature of the league, the nature of the playoffs, sort of like equalizing the playing field, leveling the playing field in the sense like, well, you can have a great season and lose your first game in the playoffs and be out, so it doesn't really matter. So there's an aspect of it, which I think, Montreal saw in 2022 having a great season, did well in the beginning of the playoffs, then lost against New York City FC. So it's a bit difficult. And if I have to give an answer, yes or no, I'd say yes. Can this team win a MLS Cup with Saputo as owner? I'll say yes. He's not here for day to day. I think the board and himself are more implicated than we would like to admit, because many of us know many things. We just didn't know was back to the old ways in a way, especially with the Renard, Nancy, and even Courtois way of working. But there is a possibility, but they need to invest a little bit more into players. If they don't, I think it's gonna be difficult. But I'll go for a yes to be positive to end this.
Good, because we didn't have a lot of positivity surrounding CF Montreal today. So Sofian ends with a big smile and maybe a little hope for some CF Montreal supporters out there. But Sofian, I really appreciate you coming on the stream today.
Thank you, guys.
It's a fascinating topic to discuss. And again, a big congratulations to Forge on the upset and hopefully better times ahead for CF Montreal. That is all the time we have for on the stream. So guys, on your way out, be sure to drop a like, drop a sub, and we will see you guys next time. Thanks, guys.